Today, we try and project the Tigers opening day roster again. That and more all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, March 7th, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. That was a shorter pause there, but I got to keep you all on your toes. If I just keep waiting longer and longer, it's we gotta. We got to make the long pauses special by throwing in some shorter ones in there. Hope your Friday's going well. We are going to try and project the roster for opening day for your Detroit Tigers yet again. It's going to be the whole show today, as the Detroit Tigers did not play a spring training game on Thursday, March 6th. They did make their official first round of cuts actually Wednesday evening after I had recorded, but I wasn't going to re-record. It's like 4 names, and they were never going to make the roster anyway. So we will talk about that. They also made a minor league signing that we will talk about on Monday, because this is going to be a pretty packed show talking about the roster. Good? Cool. Let's start off with the locks, okay? Locked On's locks. Wow. That is actually incredible. Locked On's locks. Boom. Jake Rogers, number 1, still a lock. Colt Keith, Gleyber Torres, the newest addition to the locks, Javi Baez. We'll circle back to that. I know that some people kind of squirm when they hear that. Riley Green, Parker Meadows, Kerry Carpenter, Tarek Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Reese Olson, Jason Foley, Tommy Kahnle, Bo Brisky, Will Vest, and Tyler Holton. So the only 2 really conversations I want to have with the locks, those are 15 names I just gave you, by the way. So just so you know what number we're on. 15. We got to get to 26, obviously. The only 2 conversations are Javi being added to the locks. He was not a lock in roster projection 1.0, which was before the first spring training game. So I think, there's maybe a sliver of a chance that maybe he just looks terrible and they count their losses. But I think it's pretty apparent at this point, no matter what happens, barring injury, he is going to be on the Tigers opening day roster. So he gets added, to the dismay of many. I also want to talk about Matt Vierling, obviously not being on the locks, as well as Alex Cobb, who, when we did roster projection 1.0, we already knew he was hurt. So he wasn't in the locks category either. Both of them will be an injured. Go figure. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the show again, but he obviously is removed. Now, Parker Meadows is still here, and that's the only other thing I want to bring up. Parker Meadows, I still have as a lock. This is just such a weird injury where it's he's talked about it. The coaches have talked about it. Literally, if his nerve just, this is his quote, wakes up, then he's totally fine. It's not like a lingering thing that he has to rehab back from. It's literally just about that nerve waking up and being ready to go that way. So, I am going, 3 weeks from yesterday, as you're listening to this, 3 weeks from the day I'm recording is when opening day is, right? Yeah. 3 weeks to the day. Yeah. So I am under the, not assumption, but I'm going to choose to be optimistic here and just say, you know what, in 20 days, I'm just going to hope that whatever has to happen in his arm happens and everything's just okay. There's still way too much time, and this isn't a long recovery of an injury for me to just write him off for opening day on March 7th. So I am going to keep putting him in here. We are going to have at least one, if not two more roster projection episodes before opening day. So I mean, we'll see how spring develops and how that injury continues to develop. But for now, I am just going to go again, choose optimism here and just go forward as if he's going to be the opening day center fielder. Now, that doesn't mean that in the back of our heads, we shouldn't be thinking like, okay, well, what if Parker Meadows isn't ready for opening day? And we have a lot of conversations surrounding that hypothetical in this show today. There's so many moving parts with no Matt Vierling and no Parker Meadows. And we will get to all of those. Bullpen, same as before. I debated moving Jason Foley to close to locks instead of locks. But like, I don't know. I feel like I'd be doing that just because I think maybe he's like injured and that's where the velocity has gone more so than like he just sucks. And that is a difference to me. Like, I'm not going to predict an injury. So I think I'm going to keep him there for now. We'll see how spring training goes for him. The close to locks, we just have the same two guys as last time, Dylan Dingler and Andy Ibanez. I have both of them making the roster. Andy Ibanez, I just because those type of players, like waiver pickup caliber players, and not that Andy Ibanez has proven he's been, more than that. He certainly has produced much more than that in his time as a Tiger, but just like those kind of tier and caliber of players are always, because they're cheap, relatively speaking, salary wise, they're always going to be somebody that if he just completely drops the ball the rest of spring training could not make the roster in theory. But I fully think he will, and I fully expect him to. Dingler, only thing is just like he could technically go down to the minors if they think he's struggling. But like, I think the plan is for Jake Rogers and Dylan Dingler to be the opening day catching situation. So that is now 17 names as we head into our likely category. Jace Young, John Brebbia. Brebbia was in there last time, still going to keep him in there, fully expecting him to make the opening day roster, but just because he was just signed and whatnot, I don't know, maybe some weird stuff could happen, but fully expecting him to. Jace Young wasn't in likely last time we did this. He was in toss-up, and that was because everyone was healthy. Now, I think just because of the situation and not even like he hasn't had a great spring at the plate so far. We're like a week in. I'm not overreacting to that, but he hasn't. My point is he hasn't moved up because he's been crushing the baseball. He's been moved up because the presumed opening day starting third baseman is now not going to be ready by opening day. So the next highest rank third baseman you have organizationally obviously is going to be more likely to make it. So Jace Young moves to likely. I still don't think it's maybe like an absolute slam dunk. I think there is a reality in which the Tigers just get super weird with it and are like, we're just gonna have, Ibanez and I don't know, like Ibanez and McKinstry, maybe like do some weird platoon there. Glaber gets over his like second base only thing. Malloy is not going to play third no matter what, but like maybe that like Colt Keith, I don't know. I think Jace Young's going to make the roster. This is all just, again, like hypothetical playing the odds, but I think I fully expect Jace Young to be on the opening day roster. I fully expect him to be the starting third baseman against right-handers to start off the season. Lefties, a little bit of a different conversation. We talked about Andy Ibanez. There's some other names that we can throw in the mix there. Let's get to the most talked about tier here when we do these and where there is the most names. Well, locks probably is the most names, but where there is the most arguments and the most debates is our toss-up, truly just kind of 50-50, could go either way. We'll talk about all of those names and the battles that still remain in camp right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's betting features because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I've missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com to shoot your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We, of course, will be back on Monday, recapping the weekend of spring training baseball played by your Detroit Tigers. Any news and notes that come out of camp, maybe even another round of cuts. We'll see how cuts, I say in air quotes, not all of them are getting removed from the organization entirely, but another round of decision making, I guess we'll call it. And we'll talk about some minor league moves that the Tigers have made on Monday as well. Today, we're doing roster projection 2.0. We're through 19 names here. Okay. 19. So now we are at the toss-ups, which is where all of the drama kind of lies within this organization. I'm going to tell you who I have making the team in these categories, and then obviously go through who my omissions, and we'll talk about those positional battles. So first off, I still have Trey Sweeney making my opening day roster. I also think that there's something to be said for what I would do versus what I think is going to happen. I think that the Tigers are probably going to prioritize Zach McKinstry because he's been a solid, utility player for them and can play a lot of different positions. But in the way that the roster is constructed, from my point of view, he is not necessarily needed. And I know that sounds super dramatic, but if you have Sweeney on the roster, that takes care of the shortstop, quote unquote, platoon situation. Sweeney, Javi, there. Andy Ibanez can play third, second, or first. The only thing that you would be missing, because Jace Young is a lefty, so Andy Ibanez would be righty, then you have a platoon at third, and first base, you're not platooning Colt Keith, and even if you were, then you still have righty-lefty. The only thing you would be missing by not rostering Zach McKinstry would be a left-handed hitting second baseman, and I don't think you signed Gleyber Torres to platoon him. So in my eyes, you have enough positional versatility elsewhere where Zach McKinstry is not required in order to give you that roster flexibility. Now, when Matt Vierling comes back, then you might start talking about, what now we want a left-handed hitting third baseman. Well, Jace Young isn't leaving when Matt Vierling comes back. I really think that the Tigers are going to do it, and they're just going to keep McKinstry, and I have nothing against him. Again, been a fine utility player for the Detroit Tigers over the last couple of years. I think that was a successful addition that Scott Harris made 2 opening days ago. But he's out of options, and I really don't think you necessarily, again, quote unquote, need him on your opening day roster for positional versatility. He got some reps in the corner outfield last year. I think you have that covered as well, even without Matt Vierling. As we continue here, Justin Henry Malloy, I have making the opening day roster as well. He is my 21st player on the list. And then I have Wenceel Perez making the opening day roster. He will be, 22. So Malloy makes it because he is a right-handed bat that can hit lefties. He also, if you really need to, can play corner outfield. either corner outfield position. And again, as we're learning, seems to be able to hold his own at first base. Not that that would be a super common thing, but it is doable if you need it. Gives you, again, more versatility, which is always a good thing with Hinch and co. But I think also adding Wenceel Perez makes it so that Justin Malloy really doesn't have to play in the field anytime you don't want him to. And that's obviously a weakness of his, is something that we're hoping he can develop, and I'm sure he's hoping he can continue to improve on as well. But Perez is a switch hitter that can also play both of the corner outfield positions. Now, where this gets really weird is if Parker Meadows doesn't make the opening day roster. Then, as we talked about yesterday, you throw in Jahmai Jones into that conversation. I genuinely think if Parker Meadows is not going to be ready by opening day, Jahmai Jones becomes maybe a lock. In this roster projection, because I have Parker Meadows healthy and on the opening day roster, I do not have Jahmai Jones in here, but I do have him in the toss-up category. Very, very, very apparently in the toss-up category. I think that almost goes without saying at this point. He has skyrocketed up lists, I guess I'll say, throughout the fan base and the media. The only other hitter I have in the toss-up category is Spencer Torkelson, and the reason why is because if Malloy truly isn't going to get very much time in the field anyway, then if you really do think that Torkelson is a better hitter than Malloy, then you can just do that. And you still have Wenceel Perez, and you still have infield covered with Ibanez and Trey Sweeney and the guys that you already have that are going to be the presumed starters there. So there's a lot of moving parts here. I mean, I guess in theory, you could not bring Wenceel Perez and you could go Malloy and Torkelson, but that would require Malloy to then play in the outfield consistently. And so I'm not sure that's the best course of action. I think that this coaching staff flourishes and Hinch flourishes over that flexibility and being able to play a bunch of different people all over the place. We saw that down the stretch last year. And you would be handcuffing him. You would be not allowing him to utilize one of his best assets, which is that, by giving him two positionless players / first baseman. So I can't imagine they're going to do that. You could have Jahmai Jones make the team just so that you have somebody that can play all three outfield positions, even if Parker is healthy. And then you don't have to move Riley Green over to center field ever still. That's certainly on the table too. And I think that is then also, McKinstry, if pull in case of emergency, needs to play center field, not going to be a regular thing, but you could also utilize that as well. But then he's also a lefty, and Parker Meadows is a lefty. So if he's healthy, then what does that really gain you? All of these points leading to why I would not have McKinstry make it. But I again, there's a divide between what I would do and what I think the Tigers are going to do. I think they're going to prioritize depth. Sweeney has options. No loss for anybody. He goes down to the minors to start the year. McKinstry starts off in the majors. There you go. That would be my guess right now. Starting pitching, the toss-ups, Jackson Jobe, Casey Mize, Kenta Maeda, and I'm going to keep Kiter Montero in there, even though I think he is not quite at the same percentage chance as the three guys above him that I named, just because he looked so good in his last spring outing. We do have a change here from roster projection 1.0. I went Jackson Jobe and Kenta Maeda. I do not have Casey Mize making my opening day roster anymore. That is probably the biggest change on here, like of natural change, right? And not due to injury. Sucks, really. I sat, and when I was doing prep and doing, the math and who I thought was going to make the roster and whatnot, and was drawing out my roster, I sat there for a solid half an hour, maybe longer, just trying to find a way to get Mize and Maeda both on the roster, because I've been talking about it on the show for such a long time, and I just really don't think you can do it. And I think if they feel the same way, if the Tigers feel the same way, they're going to prioritize Maeda because Mize has an option left. And that's really what it comes down to. Look, I think Mize has looked a lot better in the spring, but he looked a lot better last spring as well. Not that he had a bad year by any stretch, but I think that they're hoping for a little bit more. Maeda, obviously, they're hoping for a lot more. He was brutal a season ago. That goes, again, without saying, and I'm not trying to say he was anything other than that, but he's looked a lot better this spring. And I think, again, for flexibility, you can either keep both of them in your organization, or you can have one of the, cut Maeda. The alternative was Maeda to the bullpen and Mize to the opening day rotation. The reason that I've backpedaled from that is because I think that is significantly easier said than done. And I think that when they are stretching out Maeda's arm and his durability to be able to be a starting pitcher, that they are going to want to keep him in that role and not just change his role after getting ready for one and then, pivot to another kind of thing. Essentially, my point is, in much better explanation and much better terminology here, my point is it is way harder to just as a reliever, just wake up one day and just be a starter and just go, 6 innings or whatever. That's something that a lot of fans just assume is doable, and that's very difficult. Your arm is a trained thing, right? That is these guys have trained to be ready for a certain workload and a certain amount of pitches, and you can't just randomly ramp that up one day. So in order to keep both of them ready to be starting pitchers and not just throw one in the bullpen and shorten his workload significantly until someone's hurt and then call him up, you got to part ways with one. And the only way to do that is to send Casey Mize down because he has minor league options left. So that's my thought process there. I think Joe, I just don't think you can justify leaving him off the roster. Obviously, he has options as well. But with how he's looked in the spring, I think that would be foolish. Let's talk bullpen. Okay. We'll do that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So the toss-ups in the bullpen are Sean Gunther, Brennan Hanafy, Brant Herter, and Andrew Chafin. As it stands right now, I have 24 players on my roster. The last 2 spots are going to be filled by Brennan Hanafy and Andrew Chafin. I love Hanafy. This is a guy that I have just grown more and more on as kind of over the last calendar year as a whole. We've talked about it a lot at the end of last season and a little bit over the off season, but now, the hype train can pick back up now that we're playing ball games again. Just that bowling ball sinker, having 2 of those guys that you can kind of rely on to get ground outs, I think is valuable. I would have him on the roster. Chafin is pretty much strictly going to come down to, is he able to be ramped up to opening day ready by opening day, right? He was signed obviously after camp has started, after spring training games had started. So that is the biggest question there. Is you signed him for him to be in the major league bullpen. It's just a matter of whether he's going to be ready on opening day. So I'm going to just go under the assumption that he will be. And even if he's not, then he'll be in Toledo or whatever they decide for a couple of weeks. And assuming he stays in the organization, if he doesn't make the team, then he'll be in there pretty shortly after opening day. I'd imagine they'll only give him a few weeks after that. So I'm just going to go under the assumption that he's going to make it, just because, I would imagine that that's their plan, but that's certainly not a guarantee. That's why he's in the toss-up section. As far as the other 3, Gunther, Herter, Hanafy, they could roll 3 lefties, which is not out of the realm of possibility, and honestly might even be more likely than the scenario I just drew. Brant Herter can give you multiple innings. Sean Gunther was fantastic for the Tigers down the stretch last year. I think, I don't know. I again, pros and cons to both of those for those reasons. Herter gives you a little bit more again, multi-inning option, but maybe they can send him down to Toledo and he can be stretched out as a starter as well. And you can get, more innings under his belt type of thing. There's a lot of moving parts with that. I have Hannafy and Chafin, but I would absolutely understand if somebody had Herder and Chafin or Gunther and Chafin, to be honest with you. Montero, I think, is going to go down to Toledo because they want him to be getting reps as a starting pitcher. So similar to the Casey Mize, Kenta Maeda dilemma. As far as players that are unlikely, I have Ryan Kreidler, Matt Manning, Sawyer Gibson-Long, Ty Madden, Tyler Owens, Tyler Madison, and Chase Lee. Goodness, what a run of Ty Madden, Tyler Owens, Tyler Madison. That is a heck of a trifecta there. And then for impossible, we have our first additions there. And the only reason they're even in here is because they have officially been removed from Major League camp and are now in minor league camp, or quote unquote cut from the opening day roster. That is Wilmer Flores, Wenceel Hernandez, Elizer Alfonso, and Eddys Leonard. Those for the team, the Tigers PR department officially announced earlier in the week, would not make the opening day roster. As far as players to watch, Brennan White and Hao-Yu Lee, I still have in that category, but I think it's a huge long shot for either of those guys to make the opening day roster. I don't think that's going to happen. And then injured, as we talked about earlier, is obviously Matt Bierling and Alex Cobb. So here is, in its entirety, my roster projection 2.0. We have Jake Rogers, Dylan Dingler, Colt Keith, Gleyber Torres, Javi Baez, Trey Sweeney, Jace Young, Riley Green, Parker Meadows, Kerry Carpenter, Justin Henry Malloy, Wenceel Perez, Andy Ibanez, Tarek Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Reese Olson, Jackson Jobe, Kenta Maeda, Jason Foley, Tommy Canley, Bo Brisky, Will Vest, Tyler Holton, John Brebbia, Andrew Chafin, and Brennan Hannafy. Again, the most notable omissions there: Zach McKinstry, Spencer Torkelson, Casey Mize, Brant Herder, Sean Gunther, and Kader Montero. The only one that I think is probably going to be somewhat divisive is the Mize decision, but that's the position the organization's in. And if you are like angry hearing that and like adamantly disagree with it because of how Maeda looked last year, I completely get it and I understand it. I'm not going to stand in the way of that. I would just tell you that this is a good problem to have. This is not something to be upset over. The Detroit Tigers have been decimated with starting pitching injuries for like 3 years in a row now. Casey Mize will start games for the Detroit Tigers, probably like double-digit games for the Detroit Tigers this year. He will get his opportunities. This is not like he's just getting sent to Toledo for the whole year. This is a good problem to have because this means that you have depth. There should be tough decisions. Tough decisions out of camp means that your organization is deep. That's something that we did not have for a very long time here. And when you look at these names that aren't making the roster, like it is so impressive, the pitching depth specifically that this team has. Again, Herder, Gunther, Montero, Mize, like these are guys that were vital and good for the Detroit Tigers just a year ago. And now when the roster's at full health, aren't going to make the opening day roster. They will pitch in the majors. There will be pitching injuries, probably a lot of them, because that's the era of baseball we're in, and everything's okay. And I would much rather have a difficult decision that leads to some upset parties because of organizational depth than vice versa, and just be like, well, it's clear cut. There's no even point of doing a few of these because we just know the 26 best players because everyone else in the organization sucks. It's a good problem to have. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We, of course, will be back on Monday, recapping some minor league signings, talking about news and notes from the weekend, all that good stuff. And as always, I get one thing super wrong every spring training. So let's find out what that is. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you on Monday, baby. Go Tigers.